Right now, the CNN poll of polls, the average of 5 national polls, still has Clinton ahead by 5.
The most recent CBS News national poll shows Hillary Clinton with a 9-point lead over Donald Trump.
A double-digit landslide. That is Clinton's lead in 4 polls now.
What would Donald Trump have to do to turn things around?
Prayer.
2016, the pre-election polls showed Hillary Clinton leading Donald Trump in key battleground states that ultimately decided the presidency. They raised all sorts of questions. Is political polling fundamentally broken? Were the errors understandable and correctable? So we thought we'd ask the Tribune's co-founder and executive editor, Ross Ramsey, to put things in perspective, answer some questions for us. So how did the 2016 polls change, if they did, how you and pollsters approach polling?
Well, I think it made everybody look at their polling and see where their blind spots were. And I think, for the most part, the mistakes of 2016 were assumption mistakes. And one of the anomalies in 2016 was people voting who, based on history, wouldn't have been expected to vote. They were new voters or newly activated voters, and they came out in force for Donald Trump. The other thing about the 2016 results is they really weren't that far off. They were off marginally in states that were marginally for Trump. And those states were still within kind of in the margin of error of the polls. They were just on the Trump end of the margin. If the candidates are within the margin of error, anything could happen.
How should polls be interpreted, Ross? You've said voters see them as foregone conclusions, but that's not exactly right.
Yeah, polls are kind of a snapshot. One of our pollsters, Darren Shaw, compares it to cooking. And you've got a pot of soup on the stove, and you stir it a little bit, and you get a spoonful to see how it's tasting. You don't have to taste the whole pot of soup. You're trying to get a sample of where the electorate is at a point in time. They don't vote at a point in time. We're going to vote for 3 weeks. Somebody who votes on the very first day of early voting is voting in a different news environment than somebody who waits till election day.
How important is it to know the source of a poll?
A poll is just another piece of news. I mean, you should look at every piece of news that you get and ask, where does this come from? Who's saying this? Why are they saying it? Did they sample enough people? Did they sample them in a time frame that makes sense? What happened in that time frame?
Why then should voters trust the polls going into election day this cycle?
If you think polls are reading the future, that this is a crystal ball or a palm reading or something, you're going to be disappointed every time. If you look at these and you say, this poll might be telling me something about the electorate at a given point of time, what people are thinking, then you're going to go into an election much better informed. And, sample a lot of different things. I wouldn't look at one poll and say this is the end all be all. I would look at 4 or 5 polls and say, well, this looks like the trend in all of those polls.
What trends are you seeing from looking at several polls?
Generally speaking, Texas is a more competitive state than it was 4 years ago. These margins are getting smaller and smaller, and a lot of the big counties and now a lot of the suburban counties that used to be reliable Republican vote places are blue or purple. The people that are for Trump are really for him, and the people that are for Biden are really for him. And there are not a lot of people in the middle. One interesting thing is that independent voters this year are breaking toward the Democrats. In Texas, independent voters have tended in the last few years to break toward Republicans.
We've seen record voter registration this time around. And what about those voters?
Part of the reason we have higher registrations is because there are more people in Texas now. There could be a lot of new voters this time, and that's another reason to be skeptical about the exact numbers and pay more attention to the trends in the race and how people are looking at issues.
You just wrapped up the latest round of the University of Texas Tribune poll. What are some of the takeaways with regard to the election?
I was a little surprised at the size of the gender gap in the presidential race. Trump had a 16% margin with men and Biden had a 5% margin with women. That's a huge gap. And I think that tells you a little bit about how Republican women and women in general are feeling about Donald Trump. That race is more of a referendum on the president than it is a sort of classic red flag, blue flag race like we're seeing in the U.S. Senate. If you ask Republicans and Democrats, you get slightly different answers about what they think are the most important problems, which informs their choice of who would be the best solver of a problem. A lot of concern about the voting process and whether the results of this election are to be trusted. And I think that's a thing to watch, and it's a wariness about the election that I think is really interesting in the voters.